Most people think Japanese reliability starts and ends with Toyota, but Nissan has quietly been building some of the toughest, most overbuilt engines in automotive history. Motors that mechanics still talk about with a kind of reverence usually reserved for diesel trucks and old-school Hondas. While Nissan's reputation has taken hits over the years thanks to the CVT transmission disasters that plagued models from the mid-2000s onward, the engines bolted to the front of those transmissions were often a completely different story. Some of these power plants were engineered with such thick cylinder walls, forged internals, and conservative tuning that owners have pushed them well past 300,000 and even 400,000 miles with nothing more than routine oil changes and basic maintenance. The catch is that Nissan never really marketed this the way Toyota did with the 22R or the 2JZ. These engines built their reputation the hard way, through decades of taxi fleets, delivery vans, and daily commuters that simply refused to die, and through import tuner culture that stress-tested them in ways no factory engineer ever intended. In this video, we're counting down 7 Nissan engines that have proven, generation after generation, that they can go the distance. We'll look at what makes each one mechanically over-engineered, what typically fails first if you neglect it, and exactly what kind of maintenance schedule keeps these motors alive for 2 decades or more. Number 7. KA24DE, the truck and 240SX icon. The KA24D earns its spot on this list purely through decades of brutal, unglamorous service. This 2.4-liter inline-4 powered the Nissan hardbody truck, the Nissan Pathfinder, and most famously the 240SX, and it became legendary less for outright performance and more for its almost comedic willingness to keep running under conditions that would kill lesser engines. Mechanics who've spent years around these motors will tell you the same story over and over. Iron block, forged crankshaft, and a bottom end that was never really the weak point no matter how the engine was used or abused. What makes the KA24DE particularly interesting for longevity purposes is that it was designed during an era when Nissan was still building trucks meant for genuine commercial duty, so the internals were sized with a margin of safety that modern cost-cut engines simply don't have. The timing chain, rather than a belt, removes one of the most common failure points that kills engines around the 100,000 to 150,000 mile mark in other vehicles, since there's no rubber component that can silently snap and send valves into pistons. Where the KA24DE does ask for attention is in its top end. The single overhead cam design relies on proper valve adjustment intervals, and neglecting this over tens of thousands of miles will eventually cause noisy, inefficient operation even if it doesn't immediately kill the engine. Head gasket issues can crop up on high-mileage examples, particularly if the cooling system hasn't been flushed regularly, since these iron block, aluminum head combinations are always somewhat vulnerable to the different expansion rates between the two metals under prolonged overheating. Oil changes every 5,000 miles with a quality conventional or synthetic blend keep the internals clean, and because the KA24DE isn't a particularly high-revving or high-stress design, it doesn't demand the exotic oil specifications some modern turbocharged engines require. Owners who've kept these trucks and 240SX chassis for the long haul consistently report crossing 250,000 and 300,000 miles with only routine wear items replaced, water pumps, timing chain guides eventually, and the occasional valve cover gasket. Number 6. QR25DE, the quiet workhorse of the 2000s. The QR25D, it doesn't get much love in enthusiast circles, largely because it spent most of its life doing unglamorous duty in the Nissan Altima, Sentra SER, Rogue, and Frontier, but that unglamorous duty is exactly why it belongs on this list. This 2.5-liter inline-4 became one of Nissan's most widely produced engines of the 2000s and 2010s, and its sheer production volume means there's an enormous dataset of real-world durability to draw from. Rental fleets, rideshare drivers, and daily commuters have collectively logged hundreds of millions of miles on this motor, and the pattern that emerges is remarkably consistent when maintenance is kept up. The QR25DE uses a lightweight aluminum block with cast-in iron cylinder liners, which gives it a good balance between weight savings and the wear resistance that heavier iron blocks are known for, without introducing the sleeve separation problems that plague some aluminum block designs under extreme conditions. Where this engine built its reputation for hitting 300,000 miles is in the timing chain design, which unlike a rubber timing belt doesn't carry a hard replacement interval and, when properly lubricated with clean oil, tends to outlast the rest of the engine's major components. That said, the QR25DE isn't without known weak points, and being honest about them is part of understanding why proper care matters so much here. Early versions of this engine, particularly those found in Altimas from the mid-2000s, developed a reputation for oil consumption issues related to piston ring design, and owners who ignored gradually dropping oil levels sometimes found themselves dealing with premature engine wear or, In worst cases, catastrophic failure from running low on lubrication without realizing it. The fix for longevity here is straightforward but non-negotiable. Check your oil level manually every couple of weeks rather than trusting the dashboard light alone, and don't extend oil change intervals past 5,000 miles even if the engine appears to be running fine. Cooling system maintenance matters just as much, since the QR25DE's aluminum block is more sensitive to overheating-related warping than an all-iron design would be. Number 5. VQ35DE, the award-winning V6 that backs up the hype. The VQ35DE is probably the most decorated engine on this entire list, having landed on Ward's 10 Best Engines list multiple years running during the 2000s. And unlike a lot of award-winning engines that turn out to be more style than substance, this 3.5-liter V6 genuinely earned its reputation for both performance and durability. Found in the 350Z, Ultima, Maxima, Murano, and Infiniti G35, the VQ35DE represented Nissan at the top of its engineering game, combining a lightweight aluminum block and heads with a relatively over-square bore and stroke design that let it rev freely without the internal stress that shorter-lived high-revving engines typically suffer from. What makes this engine particularly impressive from a longevity standpoint is that it manages to deliver genuinely sporty performance. This isn't a detuned economy engine, while still holding up to daily driving abuse for hundreds of thousands of miles when maintained properly. The timing chain setup, dual overhead cams per bank, and variable valve timing system all add mechanical complexity compared to something like the old KA24DE, but Nissan's execution here was solid enough that these components rarely become the reason an engine gets junked. The most commonly cited weak point across VQ35DE generations involves oil consumption, particularly in engines built between roughly 2003 and 2006, where piston ring design again became an issue similar to what plagued the QR25DE around the same era. Owners who caught this early by monitoring oil levels closely and topping off as needed generally avoided any serious long-term damage, while those who let the engine run persistently low on oil sometimes accelerated wear on bearings and cylinder walls. Beyond oil consumption, the VQ35DE benefits enormously from regular coolant flushes, since its aluminum construction and relatively tight tolerances make it less forgiving of neglected cooling systems than older iron block designs. Valve cover gaskets and various oil seals will eventually weep with age and mileage, but these are where items rather than signs of impending failure. 350Z owners in particular have become something of an informal case study for this engine's true potential, since many of these cars are driven hard on canyon roads and even tracked occasionally. Yet high-mileage examples with 250,000-plus miles and original engines are far from rare in enthusiast circles. Number 4. VK56DE, the Titan and Armada's big iron block V8. When Nissan decided to compete in the full-size truck market with the Titan, they knew a warmed-over car engine wasn't going to cut it against the Ford, Chevy, and Toyota trucks that had decades of heavy-duty engineering behind them. So they built the VK56DE, a genuinely oversized, overbuilt 5.6-liter V8 that borrowed heavily from the DNA of Nissan's Infiniti luxury performance engines while beefing up the bottom end for truck-duty torque and towing capacity. This engine ended up in the Titan, Armada, and Infiniti QX56, and it quickly developed a reputation among truck owners as one of the most bulletproof V8s to come out of Japan, capable of towing heavy trailers and hauling serious payloads for hundreds of thousands of miles without complaint. The VK56DE's aluminum block might initially raise eyebrows among people who assume iron is always tougher, but Nissan compensated with a robust forged-style internal design and cooling passages engineered specifically to handle the sustained high-load conditions that towing and hauling create, conditions that are far more punishing on an engine than simple highway commuting. Where this engine really shines for the 300,000-mile crowd is in its relative mechanical simplicity compared to some of its turbocharged competitors. There's no turbo plumbing to fail, no intercooler to leak, and the naturally aspirated design means the engine isn't living under constant boost pressure that accelerates wear on rings, bearings, and head gaskets. Regular oil changes matter enormously here, especially because trucks doing heavy towing work generate more heat and combustion byproducts that break down oil faster than a commuter car would. Nissan and independent truck mechanics alike recommend shortening oil change intervals below the standard 5,000-mile mark if the truck sees regular towing duty, since this single habit does more to extend VK56DE life than almost anything else an owner can control. Timing chain guides on early VK56DE examples have been known to wear and occasionally cause chain slap noise, which if ignored for an extended period can lead to more serious timing issues. So addressing this promptly when it's first noticed rather than waiting for it to worsen is critical. Number 3. RB26DE The Skyline GT are legend built to take abuse. No list of durable Nissan engines would be credible without including the RB26DE, the twin turbocharged inline-six that powered the R32, R33, and R34 Skyline GTR and became one of the most revered performance engines to ever come out of Japan. What separates the RB26DE from most turbocharged performance engines of its era, and honestly from many built decades later, is that Nissan's engineers built in an almost absurd amount of mechanical margin. Reportedly, because internal Nissan politics and gentlemen's agreements about power output meant the engine was rated well below what it was actually capable of producing straight from the factory. This meant the closed-deck iron block, the oversized main bearing caps, and the overall bottom-end architecture were engineered to handle significantly more stress than the factory power figures suggested, which is exactly why this engine became the foundation for some of the highest horsepower street and drag builds in tuning history without needing the block replaced. For an engine built primarily for performance, the RB26DE's longevity track record when driven within reasonable limits and maintained properly is genuinely remarkable. Plenty of examples in Japan and increasingly in the United States following import eligibility have crossed well past 200,000 and 300,000 kilometers, and even more when converted to miles for daily driven examples, all while still running near stock power levels. The keys to this longevity center heavily around the turbocharged nature of the engine, which makes it considerably less forgiving of maintenance neglect than a naturally aspirated motor like the VK55DE or KA24DE. Oil quality and change intervals matter enormously since the turbochargers spin at extremely high speeds and rely on clean, properly viscous oil to survive, and running degraded oil for extended periods is one of the fastest ways to kill the turbos and, by extension, risk introducing debris into the rest of the engine. Boost levels also play a massive role in this engine's fate. Stock or mildly increased boost with proper, supporting modifications like an upgraded fuel system and boost controller tends to preserve the internals for the long haul, while aggressive boost increases without matching internal upgrades are what typically end an RB26DE's life prematurely, usually through a lifted head gasket or a spun bearing. Coolant system maintenance is equally critical given the heat twin turbos generate, and neglecting this is a fast track to warped heads. Number 2. VQ35HR, the refined successor that fixed the weak points. Nissan took everything they learned from the original VQ35DE and used it to build the VQ35HR, a revised version of the beloved 3.5-liter V6 that addressed many of the earlier engine's known weaknesses while retaining its reputation for strong performance and long-term reliability. Found in later 350Z models, the G35 and G37, the Ultima, and the Maxima, the VQ35HR featured a redesigned cylinder head, revised intake and exhaust ports, and improvements to the internals that specifically targeted the oil consumption issues that had dogged earlier VQ35DE examples, making this arguably the more dependable choice for anyone specifically hunting for 300,000-mile potential. The HR, in its name, stands for High Revolution, reflecting Nissan's focus on improving high RPM performance. But the durability improvements that came along with this redesign are what really matter for anyone shopping used and hoping to keep a Nissan running for the long haul. This engine benefits from over a decade of real-world data at this point, with countless G35, G37, and 350Z owners reporting well past 200,000 miles with nothing more than standard maintenance, and plenty crossing the 300,000-mile mark, particularly in Ultima and Maxima applications that saw more highway commuting than aggressive driving. The timing chain system on the VQ35HR has proven reliable across the board, and the improved piston ring design means oil consumption complaints, while not entirely eliminated, occur far less frequently and far less severely than they did on early VQ35DE examples. Regular oil changes remain the single most important maintenance item for this engine, and given its higher revving nature and slightly tighter tolerances compared to something like the KA24DE, sticking closely to a 5,000-mile interval with a quality oil matters more here than it does on some of the more relaxed engines on this list. Spark plug replacement, while not directly related to engine longevity in a mechanical sense, does matter for the VQ35HR because worn plugs can cause misfires that place uneven stress on individual cylinders over time, so staying on top of the recommended replacement interval, typically somewhere between 60,000 and 100,000 miles depending on plug type, is worth the relatively minor expense. Number 1. SR20DT, the turbocharged four-cylinder that refuses to die. Topping this list is the SR20DT, an engine so respected in tuning and enthusiast circles worldwide that it's been swapped into everything from drift cars and rally builds to boats and off-road vehicles, And its reputation for surviving abuse that would destroy most other engines is not exaggeration. It's earned through decades of real-world stress testing by owners who pushed this motor far beyond anything Nissan's engineers originally intended. Found in the Silvia 180SX, Pulsar GDIR, and various other Japanese market vehicles, this turbocharged 2.0-liter inline-4 became the go-to engine swap for an entire generation of tuners, specifically because its cast iron block could handle dramatically increased boost pressure and horsepower output without the bottom end giving up, a trait that immediately separates it from most aluminum block turbo engines of its era that couldn't handle nearly the same abuse. The closed-deck design of later SR20DT revisions further reinforced this reputation, giving the cylinder walls additional support against the kind of head gasket failures that plague open-deck turbo engines when boost is increased beyond stock levels. What makes the SR20DT particularly fascinating from a 300,000-mile perspective is that despite its performance-oriented reputation, plenty of these engines lived unglamorous lives in daily driven Japanese commuter cars, quietly racking up enormous mileage totals while their owners simply changed the oil and kept the cooling system in good shape. Proving this engine's durability isn't limited to baby show cars or track-only builds. That said, getting genuine 300,000-mile longevity out of an SR20DT absolutely depends on respecting its turbocharged nature, which means the same principles that apply to the RB26DTT apply here with even more urgency, given this engine's smaller displacement and correspondingly higher relative stress under boost. Oil changes need to happen on a strict schedule using a quality oil rated for turbocharged applications, since the turbo bearings are entirely dependent on clean, properly flowing lubrication to survive, and any prolonged period of degraded oil quality shortens both turbo life and, eventually, overall engine life. The timing chain and its tensioner deserve particular attention on higher mileage examples, since a worn tensioner allowing excess chain slack is one of the more common age-related failures on this engine, though it's a well-known and relatively affordable fix when caught early rather than ignored. Boost levels again play the deciding role in this engine's ultimate lifespan. Stock turbo setups running factory boost pressure with disciplined maintenance have proven capable of extraordinary mileage, while heavily modified examples pushing far beyond stock boost without matching internal upgrades tend to have dramatically shortened lifespans.